Okay, I'm going to make a statement, and then I'm going to show you in the Bible where this is. The three angels' messages are built upon another message. You have the first, second, and third angel's message, and there's something even prior to the first angel. It's as if there's a first angel before the first angel, if you will. And so let's look at this concept. We have the fourth angel, and this is a perfectly appropriate term, in my humble opinion. Notice, and after these things I saw, keyword, another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened, illuminated with his glory. So this is another angel. That means there must be an angel prior. So you jump back 4 chapters and you find, and the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, this is the third. And he follows 2 others, right? Because it's the third. And you go to the verse prior, and there followed another angel. So this angel is following one that came before it. It's another angel. And then you get to the first angel, and it says, I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven. So John saw an angel fly in the midst of heaven before the first angel. And what angel is that? This is the foundational message. I'm submitting that this is the foundational message of Adventism. The three angels' messages is built on the correct understanding of this text right here, Revelation 8:13. It's an important text. And behold, I heard another angel. No, behold, I heard an angel. So the angel before the first angel, the very first angel, if you will. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, he has a message. Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the 3 angels, which are yet to sound. So you have 7 angels with trumpets. And the last 3 have this woe attached to it. There's a certain aspect that's different about the last 3. Now, the Great Advent movement from 1840 to 1844 was that first angel had been around, but it was empowered on August 11th, 1840, when the second woe ends, when they predicted that the second woe would end. And that gave great impetus to the movement, and the work rapidly progressed from that point. And the people were thinking, wow, if this prophetic period found in Revelation 9 ends on August 11th, 1840, and we saw it end, we know it's true, then what about all these other prophetic periods? What about this much weightier message and much weightier evidence that's to happen, what they originally thought in the Jewish year of 1843. So they thought Christ would come back sometime in the spring of 1844. Then the midnight cry message showed that the prophetic periods actually terminate on October 22nd, 1844. So the Great Advent movement is between this time. So that first angel's message was empowered based on the correct application of the woes. And this is one of the reasons why you see this angel why you see the first angel follow this message about the woes. Because that's how it happened in Adventist history too. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you have the first 4 trumpets: Alaric, Genseric of the Vandals. Then you have the Huns with Attila being the 3rd trumpet. And then you have under the 4th trumpet, Rome actually falls. So the first 4 trumpets are judgments against Western Rome, pagan Rome. Then the 5th and 6th trumpet are against Eastern Rome. And these trumpets are different. They have woes attached to them. And these trumpets are dealing with the terrorism, the incursions, the jihads into apostate Christian kingdoms. Now, this is William Foy, 1842. He said something. Very important here. He's in vision, and he says, but 3 steps remain for him to take. Now, these are the 3 angels' messages. Before Christ can come back, these 3 steps remain for him to take. Against his breast and across his left hand was, as it were, a trumpet of pure silver, and a great and terrible voice came from the midst of the boundless place, saying, the 6th angel has not yet done sounding. William Foy, 1842. So we see that the second woe of the 6th trumpet does end on August 11th, 1840, but the 6th trumpet is not yet done sounding. And this makes sense because if we look down at the very bottom of the screen, it says that there should be time no longer, but in the days of the voice of the 7th angel. So there's time no longer, or there's no more prophetic time during the days of the voice of the 7th angel. And we know, as Adventists, that the 7th trumpet begins to sound on October 22nd, 1844. That's when prophetic time ended. The Millerites thought that that would end probationary time in world history, but no, it ends prophetic time. So the 7th trumpet can't begin to sound until the 6th trumpet is done sounding. And we see that the second woe, therefore, is an aspect of the trumpet. And that's important because when we're looking at Revelation 11:14, we have the verse about the third woe. It says, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And you'll notice in the context of Revelation 11 that we're now in the time of the 7th trumpet. So the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And so what we can infer from all this is that the woes are aspects of the trumpets. The first and second woes are based on time. They're going to be the prophetic periods, because the second woe ended with what? The prophetic period found in Revelation 9 coming to an end, right? That's when the second woe ended, but we see that the 6th trumpet is still sounding 2 years later in 1842 when William Foy is having the vision. So the first and second woes must be the time periods of the 5th and 6th trumpet. The third woe comes after 1844, therefore it must solely be based on prophetic events. We don't have a time period from when to commence the third woe, but we do have prophetic events that tell us when the third woe is coming. And we need to know when the third woe is here. That's why we're being warned. It's coming quickly. It's coming suddenly. Be ready. The second woe is past. The third woe is coming. And we need to know this. Remember, the 3 angels' messages are based on the message, woe, woe, woe. And it was the understanding of the fulfillment of the first and second woe that gave great impetus to the movement, and the work rapidly progressed. And we know that the parable, the wise and foolish virgins, has been fulfilled and will be fulfilled to the letter. So it's the correct understanding of the third woe that's going to give great impetus to the movement. The 5th trumpet is dealing with the Saracens and the Turks. Whereas the 6th trumpet, the Turks are in the forefront. The 5th trumpet starts out with the Saracens. And they're very important, and we don't want to underestimate what they did. This is the profoundly learned and illustrious and pious Joseph Mead. And notice what he says about the rise of the Saracens. He says, no nation had ever so wide a command, nor ever were so many kingdoms, so many regions subjugated in so short a space of time. That's a profound statement. Let's read that one more time. No nation had ever so wide a command, nor ever were so many kingdoms, so many regions subjugated in so short a space of time. Now do you understand why in this message that's prior to the first angel's message. It's woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth by reason of the three angels which are yet to sound. This power that comes up, there's no nation like that there's ever been like it. Its command is so wide, so many regions subjugated in such a short time, so many kingdoms. It sounds incredible, Joseph Mead says, yet most tinted is that in the space of 80 or not many more years, they subdued and acquired to the diabolical kingdom of Muhammad, Palestine, Syria, both Ananias, almost all Asia Minor, Persia, India, Egypt, Numidia, all Barbary, even to the river Niger, Portugal, Spain. Neither did their fortune or ambition stop here, till they had added also a great part of Italy, as far as to the gates of Rome. Moreover, Sicily, Candid, Cyprus, and the other islands of the Mediterranean Sea. Good God, how great a tract of land, how many crowns were here, whence also it is worthy of observation that mention is not made here, as in the other trumpets, of the third part. For as much as this plague fell no less without the bounds of the Roman Empire than within it, and extended itself even to the remotest Indies. So even the Ottomans, which come up after the Saracens, the glory of their kingdom was not as great, even though that they got Constantinople. That's in my opinion. This kingdom had subdued more regions, more kingdoms, more crowns, and it even made it to the very gates of Rome. Revelation 9:1. This is Joseph Mead is speaking of this. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth. So if you look in Revelation 1, if you look in Daniel 8 and Daniel 12, you have stars as a symbol, and they're stars for leaders. So this star is falling from heaven. In Daniel 12:3, the righteous shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. And so the righteous are like a fixed star, but a false teacher, a false leader, he is like a shooting star. His glory fades away. He's glorious, but just for a moment in time, just for that split second. So this star that's falling is a false teacher, and to him is given the key of the bottomless pit. Now, key is only used a handful of times in the Bible, and this is figurative, so we trace it in the Bible. We only have a couple verses to choose from. Submit to you that this is the key of knowledge. The bottomless pit represents a wilderness, an area that's void. This is talking about the Arabian desert. And so Muhammad has some sort of message, some sort of knowledge, and he's going to open the bottomless pit, and there arose smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. The religion of Muhammad conquered the religion of Christianity. And so the Son of Righteousness here is being darkened. The poisonous teachings are like a pestilence, like a smoke in the air. And there came out of the smoke locusts. We know that the children of the East, the Midianites, the Ishmaelites are likened unto locusts in the Bible. They come upon the earth, and unto them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power. Solomon's son says that he is going to chastise his subjects with scorpions. So a scorpion sting is chastisement. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. it was Abu Bakr, Muhammad's successor, who gives this decree. He says not to hurt the palm tree, don't kill any cattle more than you need, and only hurt those men that have those shaven crowns. The seal of God is to be saved. In a special sense, it's the Sabbath truth. And we know that those that had the shaven crown were the Catholics. There was these other worshipers who were quiet, meek people. Abu Bakr says, do not hurt them, only cleave the skulls of these Catholics. So this makes sense why this they're going after Byzantium then. Now notice this, and to them it was given. To whom it was given? Those who were commanded to hold up this decree given by Abu Bakr in 632. So to them who was given this decree in 632, that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months, 150 years. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. And in those days, in the 150 years, shall men seek death and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. So all the great expositors, all the Protestant expositors, liken these days right here, these 5 months, to the Saracens. And the Bible is being very clear when this 5-month period starts. It was commanded them in 632 that they should not hurt the grass, neither anything. And to them that was given this decree, they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. So I'm submitting that this 5 months begins in 632. Now, did anything happen 150 years later that would mark the termination of this period? Absolutely. Let's look now, and I will show you that 782 was a turning point year in the Byzantine Empire. This very year marked the last time an Arab army would achieve such a success. They marched all the way to the suburbs of Constantinople. They got all the way to Constantinople. But remember, they were told to torment. They were not told to kill. If they were told to kill, then they would have conquered Constantinople. And they were told to torment for 5 months. So they have this in 1782, they have this one last great campaign, and they made it all the way to Constantinople. And you can see God's providence saying, not any further. Tatzates in 782, he was a great general. Prior to the reign of Irene, I believe she was the first female empress of Byzantine. I think they were understanding, this is my hypothesis, they were starting to understand that these judgments from the Saracens were a result of apostasy. So they had a movement to overthrow idolatry in the kingdom, and they were having a lot of success combating the Saracens during this reign. And Tatzates was one of the great generals of that time. And Harun, who was the caliphate of the Abbasids, who got all the way to the suburbs of Constantinople in 782, he and Tatzates worked out a deal, and Tatzates defects to the sides of the Abbasids, and he was given Armenia to rule for doing that. And so one of these great generals turns on the Byzantines, and together they win the war in 1782. And his defection was due to Irene's apostasy, state policies enforcing idolatry, icon worship. In the next sentence, I say that these were not aggressive acts on the parts of the Abbasid, but retributive. What do I mean by that? After they signed this peace treaty, they entered into a peace treaty in 1782. And whenever the Greeks would revolt and stop paying tribute, the Abbasids would still come in, and they would raid into Byzantine land. But these raids were not, they weren't trying to expand their territory anymore. They weren't interested in conquering Constantinople anymore. They were retributive in nature. And so it also, we see a change in foreign policy at this time in 1782. Irene was purging all the generals that had done such a good job battling the Saracens, and she wanted to put generals who were favorable to her idolatry. And so this is why Tacitus defects to the other side. The other great generals were purged, and now they didn't really have great fighters, great generals in the kingdom anymore under Irene. But it's ironic that the Abbasids had no interest in conquering Constantinople at this very weak point. They just weren't interested in doing that. I have another quote here that says, as often as they, the Greeks, declined the payment of tribute, they were taught to feel that a month of depredation was more costly than a year of submission. So they're still under the fifth trumpet, but they're not under that woe period anymore. They're still suffering retributive judgments, but the Saracens aren't going in there and stripping land anymore. Now, this was a poem that was written about Harun, the great caliph at this time. And notice what this poem says. You made the round of Constantinople of the Greeks and placed your spear on her, and its walls were covered with humiliation. You did not desire to take her, and you contented yourself with received the tribute of her kings, while the cauldrons of war boiled. Even though Harun had, I think it was the biggest army that they had ever amassed up till that point, the Abbasids, that is, they had this opportunity to fight Constantinople. They had overthrown all the various armies in Anatolia, but they just stopped. They didn't have interest in trying to siege Constantinople, even though the opportunity was there. So you can see a change in spirit. This wasn't like the spirit of Abu Bakr and Muhammad. In contrast with their Umayyad predecessors, the Abbasid caliphates pursued a conservative foreign policy. In general terms, they were content with the territorial limits achieved, and whatever external campaigns they waged were retaliatory or preemptive, meant to preserve their frontier and impress Abbasid might upon their neighbors. So after this point in 1782, whenever they would march into Byzantine, these were just basically prestige wars. It was almost like a parade. They'd fire a couple arrows. They would beat the drums, but they weren't there to conquer anymore. They were to show their might. The Byzantines were still under the fifth trumpet, but they were no longer under this 5-month period. Now, Kennedy says, continuing a trend started by his immediate predecessors, his reign also saw the development of far more regular contacts between the Abbasid court and Byzantium, with the exchange of embassies and letters being far more common than under Umayyad rulers. So the Umayyads were all about conquering. Now, this is becoming a more educated people. They've erected the city of Baghdad, which becomes like the new Athens in the world, and they're interested in mathematics. This is where algebra comes from at this time. And they're interested in intellectual pursuits. They're interested in diplomacies. They're interested in letters. So actually, this is a sort of apostasy that's happening in the Muslim kingdom. Despite Harun's hostility, quote, the existence of embassies is a sign that the Abbasids accepted that the Byzantine Empire was a power with which they had to deal on equal terms. And that was not the mindset of their predecessors. And this is all happening exactly 5 months since Abu Bakr's decree was given. So they're forming embassies now. They're changing their foreign policy. They're getting into the study of mathematics and they're more interested in a sort of in diplomacy. They're not interested in conquering Constantinople. They're still going to accept tribute. They're still going to rule over them. They're still going to plague them. But this certainly is not a woe anymore. Notice this: fifth trumpet and sixth trumpet are different. In the fifth trumpet, it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. Verse 5 says they should not kill them. This is during the 5 months, but that they should be tormented. So they're going to torment them for 5 months. They're not going to kill them. Now jumping ahead to the sixth trumpet, and the 4 angels were loose to slay the third part of men. So you see that the 4 angels were restrained under the fifth trumpet. They were allowed to torment. They were allowed to even get up all the way to the suburbs of Constantinople, all the way to the suburbs of Rome. But they were not allowed to conquer these cities. They were not allowed to totally overthrow the apostates. And we'll take note that Irene was leading the people back into idolatry. And that is why these woes are in effect. If we just, let me just show you something real quick. If you go to the end of Revelation chapter 9, it tells you why they were allowed to torment and then allowed under the sixth trumpet to slay. And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and of wood, which neither can see nor hear nor walk, neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. They're idolaters. And so that's why these woes are taking place. That's why these woes are taking place. It's interesting that after this first 5-month period ends, we see them going back into idolatry, whereas the woe was actually leading, I believe, my hypothesis is why they're, during these 5 months, there was actually a movement within Byzantium to overthrow their idols. And that is why that general defected in 782, is because the generals that were against idolatry were being purged. That this new regime, this new evil regime was mounting up in Byzantium. So it's by no accident that that's happening in the very year of 1782 as well. You would think if they were going further into idolatry that the Lord would be plaguing them and tormenting them even more. But no, he says it's only for 5 months. It's only for 5 months. Continuing Revelation 9:18, but these 3 was the third part of men killed by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone. By the fire, by the smoke, and by the brimstone, these men were killed. They were slayed. In the fifth trumpet, they were told not to kill. And they, under the sixth trumpet, they conquered Constantinople. And Rome ceased to exist. Western Rome fell by the barbarians. The fifth and under the sixth trumpet, the Ottoman Turks took out Eastern Rome, which stood for 1,000 years after Western Rome fell. But again, under the fifth trumpet, they were just told to torment. Now, we'll get into this in a minute. Let's look at what we see this in Daniel and the Revelation. We see this in Josiah Litch's article where he predicts the end of the second woe. And they're quoting Keith here. Quote, the symbols brought to view in Revelation 9 all are agreed in applying to the Saracens and the Turks. That's Uriah Smith. Josiah Litch quoting Keith. There is scarcely so uniform an agreement among interpreters concerning any part of the apocalypse as representing the application of the fifth and sixth trumpets, or the first and second woe, to the Saracens and the Turks. It is so obvious that it can scarcely be misunderstood. And we see that when we were reading from the profoundly learned Joseph Mead. He had the Saracens for the fifth trumpet. And so the old expositors for these 5 months right here, they had the Saracens. So Revelation 9:5 is for 5 months. And in those days shall men seek death and shall not find it, and shall deserve to die, and death shall flee from them. I even think in Daniel and the Revelation that these days are attributed to the Saracen. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what you'll find if you go look that up. But what I'm submitting is those days are obviously talking about the 5 months from 632 to 782. Continuing, and the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses, prepared unto battle, and on the heads were, as it were, crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men, and they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions. They were ferocious. The Saracens were ferocious. They had long hair, but they weren't effeminate. They rode horses. We know that the Arabians are famous for their horses. Now, verse 9 shows us that we have the Turks coming onto the scene, and this figure of the horses also applies to them. And they had breastplates, and as it were, breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle. And then they were also told to torment 5 months. Let's look at that real quick. Let's read that here. Notice, and they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. Now we're speaking of the Ottomans, and they had a king over them. Just like earlier in the chapter, we have Muhammad, who's the fallen star. Now we have Ottoman. Muhammad was the leader of the Saracens. Ottoman is the leader of the Turks. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. Now, Ottoman had nothing to do with the Arabians. It wouldn't be after the sixth trumpet that the Ottomans would conquer Arabia. So this bottomless pit must be talking about the Eurasian steppe. You know, the Turks came from a bottomless pit too. The Turks came from a wilderness as well. And so the Turks have a king or a star, they have a bottomless pit, and they also ride horses. And they also torment for 5 months. Notice this here. Next, the scientists expanded their analysis to include 363 males, representing 57 modern breeds, about 1/5 of all recognized modern breeds, giving them a comprehensive chart of which stallion lines founded these breeds. They found 2 major lineages responsible for almost all modern horses: Arabian horses from the Arabian Peninsula, which is a bottomless pit, and the now extinct Turkoman horses from the Eurasian steppe, which is a bottomless pit. The researchers report today in current biology. Most horse researchers have suspected that these 2 lines played a major role in modern horse genetics, but few would have expected their influence to be this vast. This is why on the charts you see, and in the Bible, you see that the horse is the symbol for not only the Turk, but also the Saracen. And we see in history that they both had a 5-month woe. And I'd like to go back real quick and read that Joseph Mead quote, so you can just see for yourself that this was indeed a woe. No nation had ever so wide a command, nor ever were so many kingdoms, so many regions subjugated in so short a space of time. It sounds incredible that in the space of 80 or not many more years, they subdued and acquired to the diabolical kingdoms of Muhammad. I'm not going to repeat all the kingdoms there, but then he says, good God, how great attractive land, how many crowns were here. Whence also it is worthy of observation that mention is not made here, as in the other trumpets, of the third part. For as much as this plague fell no less without the bounds of the Roman Empire than within it, and extended itself even to the remotest Indies. So we can see that nobody has ever done it like the Saracens. So they also they are a part of the first woe. The first woe has two segments, 250-year periods. And this is important, and I will explain that in a moment, because we need to understand the first woe in the first and second woe to understand the third. So in Revelation 9, we have two bottomless pits, Arabian wilderness and Eurasian steppe. We have two leaders. We have a fallen star and a king. We have 250-year periods mentioned. We have two horse breeds, Arabian and Turkish, and we have two swarms of locusts, Arabian and Turkish. So the locust, that symbol is both for the Saracen and the Turk, and the horse breed, the horse figure is both for the Saracen and the Turk. The fifth trumpet, we have the Saracen and the Turks. Under the sixth trumpet, there's this Turkish unification. The Turks dominate during the whole sixth trumpet. The Saracens are subjected at that time. Now, what we're going to look at now is the little time of trouble, and we're going to see that the little time of trouble are judgments from various Islamic nations and people, and the big time of trouble is going to be a Turkish-led jihad, and this will happen once the Turk moves his capital to Jerusalem, and then right after that, probation closes, and that's when it begins. And we'll see all of that. But it's important that we understand the fifth and sixth trumpet in order to understand the seventh trumpet. It's important that we understand the first and second woe in order to understand the third woe, because it's going to follow this same pattern. It's going to follow this same pattern here. So I'm going to jump up to, we're going to now look at these, at the fourth angel's message. The message of the fall of Babylon, as given by the second angel, is repeated with the additional mention of the corruptions which has been entering the churches since 1844. The work of this angel comes in at the right time to join in the last great work of the third angel's message as it swells to a loud cry. Early Writings, page 277. So let me put this, let me phrase it in another way, just so it becomes even more clear. In the summer of 1844, the second angel's message is given. The fourth angel says the same thing. Babylon has fallen, but now we learn that there's additional corruptions here that have come into the church since 1844. And the work of this angel, the fourth angel, comes in at the right time to join in that last great work of the third angel's message. So it's at an appointed time. There must be an event then that tells us when this angel shows up. The message was given, speaking of the messages from 1840 to 1844, and there should be no delay in repeating the message. A message will soon be given by God's appointment that will swell into a loud cry. So it comes in at the right time. It comes at God's appointment. There's some prophecy that lets us know that it comes, that we're here now. Okay, and also, how can you ask for latter rain if you don't know you're in the time of the latter rain? Ask ye for rain in the time of the latter rain. And I like how we see here that there's this push to go back in time in order to get the new light, in order to get the fourth angel's message. We have to repeat the other messages because new light unfolds out of old light. It's only through the process of preaching the old messages like the 2520, the 2450, the 2300 days, the second angel's message to come out, that you receive the latter rain, because new light is not independent of old light, but an unfolding of it. And it's only through the comprehension of the old that we receive the new. So as we preach these messages, as we preach these old messages, then we build upon these messages because God adds unto them. God gives additional light. So those that aren't willing to preach these messages, you can know that those are not the men that God has raised up to give these messages. They're not a part of the latter rain movement. They're not a part of the fourth angel. It's that simple. Ask ye, as for the old paths, where is the good way? And walk therein, and ye shall find rest. Ye shall find refreshing for your soul. And they said, we would not walk therein. The view was given in 1847 when there were but very few of the Advent brethren observing the Sabbath. By the way, I just wanted to give the quote real quick. 21 MR 437, that's where I was reading from, 21 MR 437. Okay, now jumping to early writings, page 85, paragraph 3. The view was given in 1847 when there were but very few of the Advent brethren observing the Sabbath. And of these, but few supposed that its observance was of sufficient importance to draw a line between the people of God and unbelievers. Now, the fulfillment of that view is beginning to be seen. So between the First-day Advent and the Seventh-day Adventists, it's not time to separate yet. Now the fulfillment of that view is beginning to be seen. Quote, the commencement of the time of trouble, here mentioned, does not refer to the time when the plague shall begin to be poured out. That's Revelation, that's Daniel 12:1, but to a short period just before they are poured out, while Christ is in the sanctuary. At that time, while the work of salvation is closing, trouble will be coming on the earth. The nations will be angry, yet held in check, so as not to prevent the work of the third angel. At that time, the latter rain, or refreshing from the presence of the Lord, will come to give power to the loud voice of the third angel. This is very interesting. When the four winds are being held in check, that's the time that the latter rain, or refreshing from the presence of the Lord, will come. It's at, you see it in glowing text, at that time, trouble will be coming on the earth, the nations will be angry yet held in check. At that time, the latter rain, or refreshing from the presence of the Lord, will come. Now let's look at early writings 277, 21 MR 437 again, and now this quote together. We're adding in a third quote. The work of this angel, this is the latter rain message, comes in at the right time to join in the last great work of the third angel's message as it swells to a loud cry. It's at the right time. A message will soon be given by God's appointment that will swell into a loud cry. The commencement of the time of trouble, here mentioned, this is the little time of trouble, does not refer to the time when the plague shall begin to be poured out, but to a short period just before they are poured out. At that time, the nations will be angry, yet held in check, so as not to prevent the work of the third angel. At that time, the latter rain, or refreshing from the presence of the Lord, will come. So we can see that this truly is at God's appointment. This truly is at the right time. This truly happens, coincides with prophecy, in other words. The fulfillment of prophecy. Early writings 33 says, at the commencement of the time of trouble, we were filled with the Holy Ghost as we went forth and proclaimed the Sabbath more fully. So this must not be speaking of the time of trouble when the plagues are poured out, because we are being filled with the latter rain, filled with the Holy Spirit, and proclaiming the third angel's message. This must be the loud cry of the third angel's message. The Sabbath is being proclaimed more fully. So we need to know when this time period is. We need to know when it's there. So the question is, when are the four winds held in check just prior to the close of probation? And when is the time of the latter rain? Ask ye of the Lord rain in the time of the latter rain. Zechariah says that in chapter 10, verse 1. The Bible is really, and the spirit of prophecy is really trying to get us to understand when this is. Isaiah 27, verse 6 and 8 tells us when it is. He shall cause them that come of Jacob, this is the church, to take root. Israel shall blossom and bud and fill the face of the world with fruit. I want to go to James. There's one time that the latter rain is used in the New Testament. It's James chapter 5, verse 7. And it says, be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it until he receive the early and latter rain. So when the earth is when Jacob is blossoming and budding and filling the earth with fruit, it's the rain that is causing this to happen. Now in Revelation 18:1, which is the latter rain message, the earth is illuminated with the glory of God. The mystery of God, the mystery of godliness is should be finished now. Christ in you, the hope of glory. The fruits of righteousness are being produced in his people. And so it's Jacob that's blossoming and budding and filling the face with the world with fruit. It's the rain that causes us to blossom and bud, according to James chapter 5, verse 7. Now, just 2 verses down, it says, in measure when it shooteth forth. So this is just not one tree in Jacob that's blossoming and budding. The measure when the church as a whole is shooting forth, thou wilt debate with it. He stayeth his rough wind in the day of the east wind. He holds in check the 4 winds, Daniel 12:1, in the day of the east wind. Now, is the east wind a day of trouble too? Because there's a commencement of a time of trouble that happens before the big time of trouble. There's a little time of trouble that precedes it. And that's what this verse is speaking of. We can see that it is connected with the latter rain. It's connected with Jacob blossoming and budding and filling the earth with fruit, just as we learned in this quote. It's at that time when the nations are held in check. It's at that time that the latter rain or refreshing from the presence of the Lord will come. That's what the quote says. And that's what this Bible verse says. That the 4 winds or the rough winds are being held in check when Jacob is blossoming and budding, when Israel is blossoming and budding. The latter rain is here. And so what is the day of the east wind? Now we can start to understand, okay, what is this prophecy that commences this time period? We must learn what the day of the east wind is. So these are the verses where the east wind is used. This is line upon line, precept upon precept. This is the refreshing, Isaiah says. This is the latter rain. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. So this east wind, interestingly, it's coming from Arabia. It's coming from the Arabian desert, and it's causing this famine. And this is the first time it's mentioned. We have the rule of first mention. We put a more emphasis the first time something is written about, because God declares the end from the beginning. Exodus 10:13. This is the plague that was especially grievous. The word very grievous was used. The flies, the blood, the river turning to blood, the frogs, those were bad. The hail was bad. But this one was especially grievous. This was the one that caused Pharaoh to repent. And he said, Moses, just this one time, take this plague away. I have sinned against thy God. What brought the locust, which is a symbol in Revelation 9 for what? For the children of the East, for the Mohammedans. It was the east wind that brought them. Now the east wind carrieth him away, and he departeth. So we see destruction. Ephraim followeth after the east wind. He daily increaseth lies and desolation. So we see judgment, 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 every one so far. Their faces shall sup up as the east wind, and they shall gather the captivity as the sand. Okay. We see the east wind here, again, being used to symbolize judgment. And here's the last verse. Thou breakest the ships of Tarshish. These are the world traders. These are the merchants with an east wind. So the merchants of the earth are being destroyed with an east wind, which makes perfect sense because Revelation 18:1-3 is dealing with a judgment against the merchants of the earth. So this truly must be the day of the east wind. It must also involve some sort of terrorist attack involving Islamic jihadists, because it's the east wind that brings the locust. And we also have here in Amos chapter 7:1, when does God bring the locusts? Thus hath the Lord God showed unto me, and behold, he formed grasshoppers. These are locusts. Locusts in their first stage are called hoppers. He formed grasshoppers in the beginning of the shooting up of the latter growth. And lo, it was the latter growth after the king's mowings. So the former rain comes, it causes things to grow. You know, we see it right now. We're in April now, and things are getting green because it's been raining. And that first mowing, that goes to the king. That's like the first fruits. Then the latter rain comes, things grow up again. And this time it's for your own cattle, it's for your own needs. But if the grasshoppers come and eat it, this is a judgment which you can't recover from. And so he brings grasshoppers in the beginning of the shooting up of the latter growth, in the beginning of the latter rain season. So we should see an Islamic terrorist attack. It would require, in order for us to be in the fourth angel's message, in order for us to be in the latter rain season, it commences with a prophetic event dealing with Islam and Bible prophecy, and also the merchants of the earth, the world traders. This is what the Bible is teaching. We only need to go to Isaiah 30, verse 25 to see this. Then shall he give the rain of thy seed. When does he give the rain? And jumping down 2 verses, and there shall come upon every high mountain, this is in every kingdom, and in every hill, see Amos 5:24, rivers and streams of waters. In Amos 5:24, it represents righteousness and judgment. In the day of great slaughter, when thousands die, when the towers fall. So Babylon has fallen, just like when Babylon fell at the beginning, the Lord declares the end from the beginning. Towers would need to fall at the end of the world. Thousands of people needs to die, and this is when he gives the rain. It's in the day of great slaughter when the towers fall. It's in the day of the east wind, which God used to break the world traders in the past, the ships of Tarshish, and he also used it to bring in the locusts, which symbolizes Islam and Bible prophecy. Now, Miss White tells us also that Revelation 18:1-3 is fulfilled when the great buildings go down in New York, Babylon being representing the beast and his image. But we want to be able to get it from the Bible. 18 MR 63, paragraph 2, as yet the 4 winds are held until the servants of our God shall be sealed in their foreheads. The sealing is not over. He stayeth his rough wind in the day of the east wind. So on 9/11, 2001, we enter into the last phase of the sealing. We enter into the time of the third woe. We enter into the latter rain message, the fourth angel's message, the investigative judgment of the living. It's as important, if not more important, to Adventism today than perhaps even October 22nd, 1844, because the amount of, just like with Miller, with the 6,000 years, the 2520, 2450, 2300 days, 2,000 years of Hosea, signs of the times. So we have a very comprehensive message with many Bible verses and many proofs showing that we now are in this time. We now are in the time of the fourth angel. Now, I'd like to take you here to this little graph here. We have the 5th trumpet, which was restrained. He was told not to kill. And 5 months later, 150 years later, they got even to the very suburbs of Constantinople. But they didn't desire to take it. Now, when the Ottoman Turk comes along, they plague the Byzantines for 5 months as well. And then under the 6th trumpet, they are totally unrestrained and they take it. Now he restraineth the rough wind in the day of the east wind. That's 9/11. That's in the day of great slaughter when the towers fall. That's when he gives the rain. That's when Israel starts to blossom and bud. And we see that now. We are absolutely seeing that now. and it's going to swell. It's going to get greater and greater and greater. And this is why we're so privileged with so much light. We are seeing even farther than our pioneers at this time. And so surely we are in the day of great slaughter when the towers fall. Surely we are in the day of the east wind. Now, the big time of trouble when it's unrestrained has to do when the king of the north takes Jerusalem, and then shortly after that probation closes. And then we enter into the big time of trouble. Angels are holding the four winds, represented as an angry horse seeking to break loose and rush over the face of the whole earth, bearing destruction and death in its path. So this horse is restrained right now. Remember the Arabians, all the horses either come from the Arabians or the Turks. Well, you had Arab jihadists on September 11, 2001. And that was a judgment that was restrained. That was a judgment in mercy. These judgments right now, these Islamic terrorist attacks right now, are judgments in mercy. The Taliban taking back Afghanistan, that's a territorial conquest, just like what was happening under the woes previously. That was still a judgment in mercy. But once the king of the north takes the glorious land back, that right after that event, this angry horse is going to let loose, and this third woe is going to be unrestrained. The first part of it, from 9/11 to the close of probation, during the fourth angel's message, it's being held in check as to not prevent the sealing from the last phase of the sealing from completing. But then once everybody's sealed, this angry horse is let loose, and he's going to be told to kill and slay again. The appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as horsemen, so shall they run. Miss White is seeing, God is showing her that the four winds are holding back an angry horse. This must be the third woe. Blow the trumpet in Zion, sanctify a fast, call a solemn assembly. But I will remove far off from you the northern army. Remember, in Abu Bakr's decree, they're told not to hurt those that have the seal of God in their forehead, right? And so that's us at the end of the world. We don't have the seal of God in their forehead. This army is not going to be able to touch us. We will be safe from them, but they will bring death and destruction on the idolaters, on the Catholics and the apostate Protestants. And so again, under the first woe, the horses are restrained, but under the second woe, they're unrestrained. Since 9/11, since that Islamic terrorist attack, that was a judgment in mercy. But after the Turk goes to Jerusalem, then it will be unrestrained. Well, there is a little moment between Daniel 11:45 and Daniel 12:1, but anyways. This is from Great Controversy 691. This is not Ellen White, but it is interesting that this made it into the book. The impact of Muslim Turkey upon Europe after the fall of Constantinople in 1453 was as severe as has been the catastrophic conquest of the Muslim Saracens during the century and a half after the death of Muhammad. How long is a century and a half? 5 months, prophetically speaking, 150 years, during the 5 months after the death of Muhammad. When Muhammad died and Abu Bakr gave the decree in 632. There's a 5 months period there. And I find it interesting that this is in the Great Controversy. That's what we were saying today. Christian writers since have been concerned with the role of Turkey in future world events, and commentators on prophecy have seen Turkish power and its decline forecast in Scripture. So I am going to end the presentation with this quote here. Hopefully you can see that there is 2 5-month periods in Revelation chapter 9. And if the first and second woe are the criterion for the third woe, seeing that we don't have very much at all written on the third woe, we deconstruct and reverse engineer these former messages in order to be able to understand the third woe.